Peters Township was very different back in 1963. Car dealers, pizza shop, furniture stores, shopping centers, fast food restaurants, and donut shops were not to be found. Stonehenge, Colony Manor, Quill Run, Stratford Manor, and the cider lands were only cow pastures. There was only one traffic light in the township. And you could still get a barbecue at the Hollywood. Medical emergencies were handled by the 3-man police force and the volunteer fire department. Hello, I'm Erma Grego, and welcome to Senior Perspective. Today we will be telling you about a service held in Peters Township that seems to have been here forever, but in actuality saw its debut in 1963. The veterans of foreign wars decided not to wait for someone else to correct this terrible situation, and they founded the first township's ambulance service. Today we will be talking to one of the senior adults of Peters Township who has helped to create the life-changing, life-saving VFW ambulance service that we know today. Joining me is Dave Faloon.
Hi.
You have been involved with the VFW ambulance service for many years. How did you begin as a volunteer?
Well, the fellows that decided that we needed this service also decided they needed first aid training. And at the time I was active with Boy Scouts and taught them their first aid merit badges, and so they recruited me back at the very beginning.
And how did the service get started?
It was mainly because of people like Chief Barton, Chief of Police at the time, and Bob McMurray were the prime movers. And a few other fellows went to the bank and said, here's how much money we have put in the pot, and we'd like to borrow the rest to buy an ambulance and provide the service. And that's pretty much how it got started.
Before the year of 1963, what would happen if there was a medical emergency in Peters Township?
Well, people generally call the police department, and quite often there was only one car in service. And back then, they had a station wagon for a police car. It wasn't the favorite car for the police to use. They didn't like it in a chase or anything else, but you could lay down in it. If they didn't handle the emergency, sometimes a local mortician, and we didn't have any morticians in Peters Township, would be called upon to bring his hearse in, which you could also lay a patient down in and take them to the hospital. The morticians didn't particularly want to do that kind of business.
They wanted to have their own business.
It was hard on their vehicles and not too profitable, and so they didn't really want to be in the ambulance business.
Well, then there were other early vehicles.
Oh, yes. In fact, our first vehicle was acquired from a mortician over in Library, PA, and he wanted out of the ambulance business and made us a very attractive offer price-wise, that if we would buy one of his vehicles, he would make the price right if we would continue to come over to the library for a short period of time until people became aware that he was not in that type of business, and cover his area, which we agreed to do. So our first was a hearse, an ambulance hearse that we got from Mr. Osepic over in Library, PA. And after that one, why, it was quite elderly, and after that vehicle we moved into another used ambulance which looked like a hearse and was one of the long Cadillac type vehicles. But after we started doing more treatment in the units, particularly CPR, was almost impossible to do over top of a patient when there wasn't any headroom to speak of. So we went then to the larger modular units, which you're more familiar with today.
I was reading somewhere that there was quite a concern when women wanted to join the service. What memories do you have of that?
Oh, I got a lot of good memories on that one. We helped to start the ambulance service over in Canonsburg when we had been operating a while, and the VFW over there wanted to know about starting. And I can remember they were adamant that there would never be a female work on their ambulance service. We had no policy one way or the other, and on taking an elderly gentleman who had fallen out of a tree that he was pruning and was quite badly broken up, his daughter-in-law thought that that was an excellent service. It took the injured man off of her hands and took care of him, and she thought that was wonderful, and she wanted to know if she could learn some first aid. So we enrolled her in one of our first aid classes, which the ambulance service does provide, did then and still does provide to the community training. And after she got the training, why, I said, "Are you going to join us as a volunteer?" And she didn't think she could drive one of those big things. And I said, "Well, you drive the farm truck, so you surely can drive an ambulance." And she shook her head, yeah, she thought maybe she could, and turned out to be an excellent attendant, and that broke the ice. And
So
since
that's how
then,
you
we've
got your
had
first woman's driver then.
we've had many since then, and they are excellent. In fact, particularly with a children or a female patient, I think they're better. So.
I bet you've seen many changes in the last 31 years, and 911 has only been here for a short time. How do the ambulance crews get their calls in the years before?
Well, years before, if you wanted the police, you dialed 833-2000, and that got you the Bethel police. And they had a radio system, and their dispatcher would dispatch to our police cars. So before Peters Township ever had a dispatch system. That same way that dispatcher would then telephone one of us that was the lead man that night or that day, and we then would call the other crew members, and we would all scramble and get on board and go out and answer the calls. Years later, Chief Barton finally got his own police radio dispatch, and we prefer that system because that way the ambulance and the police are in the same frequency and can quite often help each other. And we've had an excellent cooperative nature between our fire department, our police department, and our ambulance department.
Everybody working together, you can get a call in a lot quicker.
And the patrol cars are out there, and when a call comes in, it's radioed to them as well as telephoned to us or radioed to us now in some cases. And they can maybe arrive on the scene and give immediate aid until we arrive, and it's been a very good cooperative thing. The telephone was the main way in the old days, and after a while, teenage kids were tying up our telephone, and the operator was trying to get through to us, so the ambulance service provided private phones for ambulance use only in some of our homes. And then after that, we went to the beeper that you see people wearing on their belt. And today, we still use the beeper, but also a lot of our key people are two-way radio equipped, the little portables.
Mm-hmm. So. And they have them in their homes? Is that, or
carry them with them 24 hours a day in some cases. Mr. Atkison and Tom McMurray and I are on the Committee of Management, and we're monitoring constantly from a management standpoint, and also Tom and Bob are still going out on a lot of calls. I'm not going out on as many as I used to, but we constantly keep in communications. There's radio communications from our office to our units also.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I saw one of your programs from your 25th anniversary party that you had.
Oh, yeah.
And you are a life member of the ambulance service. How does one become a life member?
Well, that's sort of an honor that we just decided to create for people who have served 10 years or more on the ambulance service. And every year, after about, I guess, our third or fourth year that we were in the ambulance business, we thought these volunteers should be paid somehow or patted on the back, so we've had dinners every year. And after somebody becomes a 10-year member, Even if they're no longer working on the ambulance service, they're still a life member, and they can come to our banquets, and we still consider them a full-fledged member of our service because they've given over 10 years.
Right. Are there very many of those?
We have quite a few. In fact, we have some husband and wife teams that are that are life members. Mike Truz, I know, has given over 25 years of service until recent years. There's quite a few. From 1963 to 93, there's been a lot of people come and go, but quite a few of them have stuck out the 10 years.
That's wonderful. Since you've been involved with the VFW ambulance service almost since its beginning, what are some of the biggest changes that you've seen?
Well, I think training and communications are the two major things that way back in the beginning were our major worries or concerns to us. We feel if you have the training, even if you don't have the very latest equipment, if you have the training and the know-how, you can help people an awful lot from the time you first reach them until you turn them over to the people in the hospital.
You mean like a first aid training? And
first aid
CPR
training, so on. Back when we started the service, all you had to do is paint the word ambulance on the side of a vehicle, put your name in the yellow pages under ambulance, and you were in business. You didn't have to have a first aid card or anything. We'd never have operated that way. I immediately got my instructor's rating in Red Cross First Aid and taught everybody else that came on the service for the first about 17 years. And since then, we've had other people as training officers. And the state of Pennsylvania finally caught on and came out with an ambulance attendant license. And some of us were the first to be ambulance attendants in Pennsylvania. But that, of course, didn't even have emergency childbirth, and once in a while we get faced with that, so we wanted something more, and they developed EMT, Emergency Medical Technician, which is a license just like a doctor's or nurse license by the Health Department of the state of Pennsylvania. When that got more advanced, why, they then created paramedic. And that means just what it means. Medic means doctor, para means the helper. The paramedic is the hands and the eyes of the doctor in the field. And with communications, I'm getting out of my the education now, communications, with good communications, you communicate directly with the doctor. And
right
at the hospital, we can communicate to the doctor what we see with that patient, and he can then tell us what treatment to give it. And a paramedic is allowed to start IVs, is allowed to, can read EKGs, and we have portable EKG. We call it a life pack. And if the doctor isn't sure that what we're telling him, we can even plug that into a telephone, and he can plug his telephone in at the hospital, and he can read the EKG right off the patient who's 15 miles away. So communications is really very, very important. And our having close communications with the police helped us to find people back before we had names on half of these streets and didn't have street numbers.
When it was RD and all this and that, where you didn't know where it led to.
Yeah, so I think those two things, training and communications, are the key to good emergency care.
You know, I think you did have an experience with a baby being born in the ambulance.
Yeah, well, the first one we had was about 5:30 or 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning. Fred Carper and I were the crew, and out on Center Church Road was the expectant parents. And I guess they had quite a bit of confusion because they called the grandmother and grandfather to come watch the children they already had while something else was done. And the grandmother and grandfather forgot to hang up the phone, so they lost communications. They couldn't call, and a neighbor finally called the police. And when we got there, the husband and the patrolman, neither one of whom knew anything about emergency childbirth, were bringing the woman out of the house upright, and that was wrong because she was screaming, "The baby's coming." So we, as quickly as possible, put her on a gurney, put her into the ambulance. The policeman ran and said, I'll open the crossroads up for you. the father ran in a house, and Fred and I were sort of stuck with a situation that we'd prefer not to do that. It's our training says stay at home, and if it's imminent, and it's a lot less confusion than bouncing down the highway. And everybody always asks me, well, did I, hit the baby on the bottom of the feet or slap its back? And I give credit to Fred, who was driving after the baby was born, and out where I suctioned it and cleared its breathing passages, and you normally would start the breathing. We hit a big bump. I think it was near Valley Brook Road, and baby started to cry, so the mother was happy, and I was much relieved.
That was quite an experience then.
It's a lot of fun.
Well, back to the volunteers. How old does one have to be to belong to the service?
Well, we'll take volunteers at 18 or older. Quite often, we will not allow them to drive. But we find out that some of these 18-year-olds that are mature for 18 are as good an attendant as you'll get at 21, so a lot of service at 21, but we will take volunteers at 18, and glad to have them. We're glad to have any kind of volunteer.
What are some of the requirements for becoming a volunteer and staying on the squad?
Well, just don't do anything greatly wrong and or bad. No, to continue with your training's the main thing. If they come to us and they don't have any, then we assist them in getting into the necessary training program so that when they are out there and we have a situation, they know what the next piece of equipment is to give to the people. We never let a new recruit ride alone or anything. We always put them in with experienced people so that they will get their on-the-job training as well as their emergency medical technician training, and hopefully they'll go the whole way for paramedic training. But the service will assist them in getting that training.
I know the high school students at Peters get involved with a project called VOID.
Yeah,
can you tell us something about that?
That's the Visions of Instant Death program, which is put on primarily for your seniors and juniors at the high school, usually just before prom time. And it's so tragic when you hear of young people that have come that far along and then party a little bit more than they should possibly, and it's a tragic accident, and it just spoils the whole graduation scene and everything else. And we don't want that to happen. So in cooperation with our police and our fire department, we have instituted this VOID program, which is a mock accident. And we usually do it right in the parking lot there at the school and have the students on the hillside so they can watch it. And a car comes up and finds the situation, and somebody goes for help, and the police then arrive and the ambulance arrive, and if necessary for extrication, the fire department comes with the jaws of life. And the last time we did it, Life Flight was very cooperative, and they brought in their Life Flight ambulance. And Mr. Bogan, the funeral director from over in Cannonsburg, also cooperated very well, and the last person to leave the scene, I'm afraid, left with Mr. Bogan. Hopefully this makes a point with these young people that drinking and driving do not mix, and so on. The following year, instead of another mock accident, sometimes we have a mock trial, where the people from the accident the year before go on trial, and you find out just how serious this can affect your life if you're involved some way or another with something like this. So hopefully we try and talk ourselves out of some business by putting on the VOID program.
Well, it's not only physically, it's also a very mental instant. So, okay, I read a little article in one of your clippings that you gave me, and it was ceremony uniforms marching in procession give a community a sense of pride, but that pride is nothing compared to the feeling of thanksgiving when the uniform of a trained attendant answers the call of need. I'd like to thank you, Dave, for being here on Senior Perspective. It's been a pleasure to talk with you.
It's always a pleasure to talk to Erma Grego.
So, you think things are easier today than it was for you?
It's a lot easier for these today because they have had the training. Where when we first started, all we got was the ambulance, one oxygen bottle, and a mask, and actually no training until we went to the Red Cross, got our first aid, then had to go to Pittsburgh to get our advanced first aid and instructors. Here, they've gone through all that, plus the EMTs, paramedics, and everything else.
Do you think it's harder, though, with the equipment today to learn the equipment, or is it...
Once you learn the equipment, it's the same thing as a doctor. If you're going to be in that field, eventually it comes natural to you. But if I had to go back on it myself now, I've been off 3 years, they'd have to show me the whole thing all over again. They've had a lot of equipment added since 3 years ago and everything else.
Yeah, things change rapidly? Or?
Every time anything comes up, anything new is developed, they're in right on it.
Do
So
you think we have state-of-the-art stuff here? State-of-the-art equipment?
I think you've got the same thing that you see on 911 on television. As far as I'm concerned, I said I'd trust them better than I would someone else.
To be a driver, do you have to? Do certain people drive these? Be the driver, or are there designated drivers, something like that, or does everyone get?
I think almost everybody can drive it. I don't think they really have a designated driver. In other words, you're carrying a person, then all he does is driving. You still got to learn in order to help everybody else together.
Is everyone on call for 24 hours, or they work in shifts? Or?
They work in shift. They have a whole schedule for it. In other words, I don't know offhand what the hours are, but the schedule is right behind there. It's all scheduled for the whole week.
How about the staff? How many are on staff here?
I don't know. You'd have to ask Sandy on that. I don't know what they have on staff. Works up in the office. Matter of fact, some of these are doing paperwork up there, too. Some of your attendants.
Welcome back to Senior Perspective. This is Erma Grego, and tonight I am going to introduce my guests from the Peters Township Ambulance Corps. Over here we have Jeannie Pattison, who was one of the first paramedics. Tom McMurray is crew chief. Bob Atkison is assistant crew chief. And Ron Baker is our PR person and the chief fundraiser for the last 8 years. And Mike Truz is a charter member, and Dave Faloon is also a charter member. So tonight, why don't you start, Mike, and see if you can tell us some of your things about the Ambulance Corps.
I'll start, but I have to go back before the Ambulance Corps actually started. Memorial Park Post 764, the VFW, started in '62 by the past chief of police, Ralph Barton. And it was in '63 when there was a wreck on 19 and nobody had an ambulance. Every police station used to carry a station wagon. They do pick them up in a station wagon. Well, it got to give credit to past Chief Barton, because he took it on himself to see if anything could be done as far as getting ambulance service. So he went down to the library and bought one. Of course, he said he didn't, but he actually paid it for it himself, about $400, and that's how our ambulance crew actually got started.
Mm-hmm.
The other members that were instrumental in starting this service were Chip Barton, his son, Gabe Sumney, Tom Schillinger, Larry Claypool, myself, Fred Carper, in Rother. And actually the first trip was on Labor Day of '63.
Is that when that accident was over
No,
at
this was a different accident, because that one in Upper St. Clair is what made Barton and them to think about
that we needed the help?
we needed help somehow.
Uh-huh.
Now, that's how, from then, we just kept picking up, because when Ralph was the commander for the first 2 years of that post, he started the ambulance, and there was nobody could work on that unless they were VFW members.
Mm-hmm.
He was just that way. In other words, he said this is a project of the VFW, and it actually overgrew what VFW could do for him. And it even, when we didn't have a home, we met up at the municipal building, and what's her name, Dorothy Lucian, had the brownies down there, and I talked her into coming and running on the ambulance. And I think she was the first woman that actually helped us run the ambulance.
Mm-hmm.
But the township has really been support the whole services. We've got donations from different organizations, different people, and anyone that actually wanted to help on there. I have a few names that were from way back there for the first 10 years. McMurray Lions Club gave us 2 tires and a door opener for the garage.
Well,
The Peters Township Protective Association donated us one-man cot for the ambulance. The Kiwanis Club, a complete set of oxygen equipment, and the RCA donated us 2 walkie-talkies. McMurray Century Club gave us $600 to purchase a walkie-talkie. The Peters Township Protective Association donated us $2,500 when they had to give up their charter, and that was in their funds, so that they gave it to different funds. We ended up with the best part of their
yes,
$2,500. Going farther than that, the Citizens Water Company. You know where up there on 19 where Big Boy is?
Yeah.
They had a big valve there, and they had a big building over it for wintertime. They donated that to us through some work of Mr. Frobe with the township, and I don't know how, but I wasn't there, but they carted that building down by the library, and then we extended that about 8 foot, and that was actually our first garage for the ambulance.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, they kept it across the street where I think Swanson had a garage there.
Oh, yes, that white building there on McMurray Road.
And then later on, we had when they went there, kept it up to McMurray's place. He had a big driveway, so it wouldn't make.
Yeah, Tom, maybe you can tell us something about that.
When in between the time of the garages, we used to park it out in our driveway. And as Mike said, that was a place where there was a lot of parking room and everything. So for probably a year or two, we kept it up there while the garage down to municipal building was being refurbished.
Mm-hmm. I hear that when you were just a youngster, in the wintertime, you used to have to go out and clean a windshield. Tell us something about that. I mean, you started out quite young.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Probably one of our the youngest members.
Youngest member of the ambulance corps. You grew into it.
He can't claim to be a charter member, but when an ambulance call would come in, his dad was pulling his clothes on, Tom would run out there in his pajamas and sweep the snow off, get the motor started. And then his dad would go out and get in and take off on the trip.
Uh-huh.
He's been active for quite a few years with us.
Yeah, so that was a very important part. Did you realize then that you were a member of the ambulance corps?
Yes, I did.
Okay, Mr. Atkinson, can you tell us something about the ambulance corps? Is it more present than past for you?
Well, I've been involved for about 12 or 13 years, as a matter of fact, and in that time, of course, there's been some major changes. It's progressed from what was basically a group of volunteers to a point now that we have certainly some volunteers, but it's basically a paid service. We have staff 24 hours a day with state-certified paramedics and EMTs running about 3,000 trips a year. So
3,000?
3,000 trips a year in 1994. So you can see what's happened in the 25 or so. I guess it's almost 30 years now, isn't it? 30-some years, yes, since it was founded.
Well, that shows how the township has grown then.
Obviously, with a population now of 15,000, so it's going to continue to grow, and I'm sure the ambulance service will continue to grow. Peters Township is very fortunate to have this ambulance service. It's a very good one. It's very well respected and well thought of.
Right, and it's a lot of help to a lot of people. And we've had a lot of, I know that all of you have had some very nice experiences and something that you want to remember. Is there anything that any of you can remember of
Well, I
anything?
think Bob maybe should elaborate. We started out with the old Cadillac hearse type ambulances, but right now I think Bob knows more about the vehicles that we have and been very instrumental in the ordering of the last,
Six or eight, I suppose, but right now we have 3 ambulances, 2 van type Ford diesels and 1 full dual-wheeled box on a Chevy chassis. We're also, at this point in time, and have been for a number of years, as a matter of fact, supported by the township, who provides a donation to the ambulance service every year, to the extent that they buy a subscription, if you will, for all of the senior citizens in Peters Township, so that all of the seniors in Peters Township get free ambulance care, thanks to the township. In other words, they buy a subscription for the senior citizens in the township, which is, again, a very unique thing and something that I think doesn't get enough publicity, really.
Right, I know that I was speaking to my mother today. She'll be 93 in May, and she lives up in Hickory. But she was saying that if they have to do anything, they have to pay.
Absolutely.
Even though she is a senior in that, of course, through Medicare and that, but they don't have the things that we have here.
Can I ask Bob a question?
Sure.
Has the price of ambulance gone up since the $400 we paid for the
You better believe it. Ambulances today cost anywhere from $50,000 to $65,000, and that is without the equipment that goes in them. That's just the ambulance itself, depending on talking a van or a box and how big it is. But you're looking at $50,000 to $65,000.
For
then,
one
of course, you
ambulance.
put all of your BLS and ALS equipment into it, which kicks the price up another $15,000 or $20,000. So you're looking at a big investment, no question about it. But they do, of course, we run them for over 100,000 miles. You have to in order to get your money's worth, so to speak. We're quite happy with the situation today, both from a personnel standpoint and from a support standpoint. And I feel very good about it. I want to thank everyone for the support that we do get.
Talking about support, I'm going to make this man here blush. But,
It's a good lead-in for you.
Yeah, there you go.
the largest amount of funds that have been raised by any one person or organization in in the whole history of our organization has been the golf outing that, Ron, how about telling about how you got started and who some of the people are that help you out on that?
Well, it started about 7 years ago, and I was at dinner one night with a guy named Bill Newmoff. And the day we had the dinner, he said that he played golf with 3 other guys, and he said, "Boy, it would be nice if you would start a golf outing." And I said, "Well, what would I do it for? Why, or what should I do it for?" And it came down to, I would do it for the ambulance people because they needed a little support. So without even doing anything, the next day I started, and I called the Rolling Hills Country Club, and I told them I was going to have a golf outing, which I knew nothing about. And now it's 7 years later, we have it at Valley Brook, and it went from 102 golfers, now we're up to about 180, and it keeps growing. And I'd like to get at this time, if anybody would like to get in this golf outing, they could call my place or McDonald's or one of the other places in Peters Township.
My place happens to be the
That
Golden
would,
Shears.
yeah,
Let's get a
the
plug
I
in.
didn't want to plug. But, it's a good thing, and I think it's good for the community, and I think it's helped a lot of people out. And I'm just glad that I could do it.
You've done a real good job in
Thank you.
that. And
When you hear about the
continue.
cost of the ambulance, And then you start talking, Tom, how much does a life pack cost now?
Anywhere between $8,000 and $10,000.
What is a life pack?
Jeannie?
Yes, we'll get you in on something here
What's a life
too.
pack?
Okay, it's a heart monitor is what it is. We can monitor the heart just like they can in the emergency room or in any of the hospital rooms at a hospital. And
Right on the accident scene.
yes, and we can also, if we have to, say the person goes into asystole, or in other words, no heartbeat, we can give them a shock, just like, in other words, we can do just what you see on 911.
I didn't mean to leave you last, but
No problem. No problem.
maybe you could tell us something about what training a paramedic has to achieve before they can become one.
There's an awful lot of schooling. It's put on, or at least you can get it through Washington County, and also Allegheny Community College has a big course. I don't really know now what the hours are.
It's like a course, a college course that you have to
yes,
take.
you have didactic and clinical.
Oh.
And then after you pass your state boards, then you put in time monthly, or you used to put in time monthly at the hospital, in the emergency room, so that the doctor had confidence in you whenever you called in for orders.
Oh, you mean you really had to train right in the hospital
yes,
then?
yes.
Oh.
And continue. It's always continuing education with this too.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same way with an emergency medical tech. We have to do continuing education, and we're recertified every 3 years with the state.
Well, I guess so, because things change every
Right.
year, you guys will say, and a lot of new things come up and all, and that's, well, it really keep you on your toes and that for all of you. And
One of the new things that we're starting in Peters Township is, and to go along with what Bob was saying about the support, we get excellent support between the fire department and the police department in this township. Whenever a medical call comes in, the police department's automatically dispatched. And a number of the people on the police department are emergency medical technicians, as well as they're all trained as first responders.
I noticed that, Tom, that whenever an ambulance call goes out, that the police car is always there too, and I often, when I'd go by or something and see that, and often wondered why that was.
We can generally have emergency care to a person within 2 to 4 minutes of the call coming in, because of the police being able to respond. One of the new programs that we're starting in the next month or two in conjunction with St. Clair Hospital is a machine they call an AED, which is an automatic internal defibrillator, which means 2 of the police cars will carry a type of a life pack in the car with them, and the policeman will be able to defibrillate before we even get there. This is a new program that's pretty revolutionary that's coming along, and we hope to be able to save some lives with it in conjunction with it. So it's the township is to be commended for supporting that, as well as St. Clair Hospital and the police department for going along with it.
Yeah, is that part of what they say 911, or is that something altogether different?
That's completely different. That's the actual dispatch system, but they play a part in the whole process. When you call, there are people there who are trained to also give you instructions in first aid and to keep you calm and to try and help you out while the police or the fire and ambulance are responding.
What's this new co-op or backup that you just got between South Hills?
One of the, as we've gotten busy, as Bob mentioned, we're over 3,000 trips this year, up from 800, which was only about 7-8 years ago. We've found that we have to depend on our neighbors to work together. And we formed a cooperative as well as enhanced mutual aid with several of our surrounding services. And with this, it shortens our response time. We're in communication with all the surrounding services, and we share training, we share some equipment, and it's just being able to work together with the other people in the business around us, which is
What communities are involved in this?
We have mutual aid agreements with every community that surrounds us: Washington
Like
Share,
Canonsburg.
Canonsburg, Cecil, Tri-Community in Mon City, Upper St. Clair, all the way
Oh,
around.
it takes in quite an area then.
Yes. Well, it's because we cover Nottingham as well as Cecil and parts of North Strabane. We have quite an area to cover. And we always have to have someone, because we many times have 3 ambulances out on the road and another call come in.
At one
so we have
time?
someone comes in. Yeah.
Oh, my.
And by having this, we're still able to get ambulances to respond in Peters Township within a very short period of time in conjunction with the police.
very interesting. I mean, I didn't realize it was so complicated.
Well, you can't schedule ambulance calls, unfortunately, so it's a feast or famine type business. And the bottom line is that there are times when you simply don't have an ambulance available. That happens to everyone, so you call on your surrounding services to provide response.
Yeah.
And the thing that Mike was referring to was this South Suburban Alliance, if you will, that really is an enhanced mutual aid situation where we're expecting help more quickly and we're giving help more quickly. It's a communication thing. It's an improvement on what really was enforced before, but it really encompasses a larger area. I think that's the bottom line.
The ambulance business pretty much boils down to training and communications. Of course, a lot of good equipment is necessary too, but the communications is a very key part, and being able to communicate with other surrounding services, help them out when they need us, and vice versa.
Can I interject something?
Certainly.
Going back, I'm going to ask Tom a question afterwards. When we first started the ambulance, in order to get funds to run it, we knocked on doors. The subscription was only $5
Per family, or per
for a
person.
family for a year.
For a year. Mm.
I know when I went to one place, I won't mention where, the guy was painting a house. And I asked him, oh, he says, I got insurance. The neighbor come over, he said, what do you mean you got insurance? Well, I says, if you don't want to join the $5, I says, per family for a year, in case something happens, make sure you call the insurance company. He reached in his pocket and gave me $5. So what are your fees now? And as far as trips are concerned, you know the cost of them.
The subscription, one ticket is $35 for a family, which is unlimited medical emergency trips with that. Then we do bill insurance companies on a third-party basis with that. And as Bob mentioned, senior citizens don't pay any fees. So it has gone up quite a bit in 32 years.
Well, what if they moved over from one hospital to another or something like that? Is there an additional charge for that, or?
Depending on the circumstances, sometimes the hospital will pay, sometimes the insurance will pay.
Mm-hmm.
So billing has gotten to be quite an involved process anymore with that word.
As everything else.
It is. We have computers, and we have Sandy McMurray, who's trained in doing all the billing and does the Medicare billing and all that, as well as running the office. So it's gotten to be quite a elaborate procedure.
Yeah, I was wondering who did that. I probably should have had her on the show, too.
Well, Jeannie also helps.
Well, Jeannie does that, too?
Yeah, yeah.
I was going to ask you, what is your present position in the ambulance corps now?
I'm an emergency medical tech. I run every Wednesday night. I go on at 6 p.m. and go off at 6 a.m. Thursday morning. For 12 hours. And I also, a couple days a week, work in the office, helping with the Medicare billing with Sandy.
Mm-hmm.
What's the average cost of an ambulance trip that's billed, Jeannie? I suppose it's $250, something like that?
That's low, I would say.
Higher than that?
Mm-hmm. It all depends on what equipment was used. There's like a base rate, and then if the medics have to use any of the advanced life support equipment, then that can be charged for. So I'd say $250 is one of the lower bills.
Just today I had coffee with a fellow that was telling me that a relative of his, of course it was 70 miles to the ambulance trip, total mileage on the ambulance trip. He was billed $1,700 for that trip. So it can go from $1,700 down to a family subscription, which is relatively a cheap investment.
One of the things that Mike brought up was, as far as the subscription rate, is that many people will comment that they don't have to be subscribers because they're covered by insurance. But they may never have a trip, but our expenses go on all the way. So we've had more than a couple of people who have been subscribers since 1963 when it started. And even though some of them have passed the 65-year-old mark, they still continue to donate for us with that. And those are the people that have kept the ambulance service going all these years, is being able to do that ongoing subscription campaign.
Yeah.
That's one of the questions I have asked me all the time. How do you get into how do you get a subscription? And I always say Sandy McMurray, and call Sandy. But a lot of new people, Tom, don't know.
We do a mass mailing. We try to do it once every year, but with some of the changes in address this year, we didn't get one out this year. But our phone number is 941-6660, which is the office number, can be called down there if anyone needs a subscription form.
So, Ron, when's your next golf outing?
It's going to be August the 7th, and it's at Valley Brook Country Club. And as of right now, I could use more people if they want to get into this, either a single, twosome, foursome. It's $150 a man to play, but we give them breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and it's usually pretty good. And if anybody would like to get into that, then they could call me or call McDonald's, Ron at McDonald's there, and he'll take care of it. And I have a phone number too if you want to call me at 941-8189 and get in.
Ron has already passed paying for one ambulance. He's starting on a second one.
Really? Wonderful. Oh, that's really great.
And it's a real nice evening. I've never been there for the golfing because I don't golf, but I have attended the dinner in the evening, and it is a very, very nice affair.
Yeah, you could even just go to a dinner there, you know, if you're not a golfer.
We talked about people a little bit ago about who's running with us, and we said, well, there aren't many volunteers. That doesn't mean that there isn't the opportunity if someone would like to run with us. We require CPR training and first aid training, but it's hard to get the EMT training. That's over 120 hours, which takes 3 or 4 months. It's quite a commitment, as well as some hospital time. But if someone would like to run as an observer or just to get a feel for it, they're always welcome to go on a volunteer basis. It's something you're giving of yourself. You get a lot out of.
Right. And you would call the office if anybody would be interested in
That's
that
correct.
then?
That's correct.
Did you, you know, they have that, what is it, the welcome wagon or something? Do you have any information that,
welcome wagon?
welcome wagon?
Yeah.
You could, do you do anything like that to let people know about the
We
ambulance
have a
corner?
brochure that goes out with that, as well as a subscription letter that is in with that.
For the new people as they come
I
in?
think that's standard practice with the welcome wagon for the ambulance information to be included in that packet.
And some of the realtors have packets they provide to people looking at Peters Township, and that's included with that too. And we have the brochure in some of the doctor's offices and some at the library and some other places around the township.
Community Day, we always try to set up a display in the park so that anybody from the community that's in the park that day will come over and ask questions. We're only too happy to enroll them in our subscription plan, try to get them to work for, as a volunteer.
That's one of the many things that, aside from just providing emergency service, we provide first aid courses, CPR courses. We help the scouts a lot of times with their first aid program. We help the schools. We send ambulances to their health courses, go through that. We participate with the school and the police department with Project Void, which is a simulated accident around prom time. Started that several years ago.
I heard about that.
We got a real nice program that's gone through with that. We stand by at a lot of events at many times there's walks for money. We stand by at those. So we try to keep a visible profile in the township so people know that we're out there.
Tom, you will be up at that school for the Olympics, which on May 9th.
Normally that's the Special Olympic is an
It's going to be held at the high school.
That's correct.
Jeannie, you were talking about paying bills. I know when we charge $5, all the equipment that we use, I don't think it would charge $5. All we had was an oxygen tank. But now with all these helicopters you got and helos, Tom, what connection do you have and with which one? How do you get it?
There are 2 helicopters in Pittsburgh, Stat Medevac as well as Life Flight out of Allegheny General. We work through our medical command hospital, which is Cannonsburg General. If we have a need for a helicopter to come, we go through our medical command, which will call the helicopter to land in an area that's pre-designated. In cooperation with the fire department, we've gone through the township and identified landing zones all the way through. When a helicopter comes out, it's quite a procedure also, because the fire company is called out, they set up a landing zone, have to guard the area so that people don't wander into it. and then they stand by. They have to have their hoses and everything out in case there is a fire or any kind of an accident. So that's, and depending on which helicopter is called, depending on which one's available, generally.
Okay, well, I want to thank all of you very, very much for your attendance, and I've learned a lot of things tonight. And we'd like to end our program tonight with the ambulance attendance prayer, and I think that would be very appropriate.
The ambulance attendant prayer. Whene'er I hear that ambulance bell and I begin to run, this is the prayer I offer up to the Almighty One. From frozen ears and frozen feet to elderly so pale, from scalded face and scalded hand to the baby's first wail, from one person who is quietly ill to an accident's noisy band, Lord, grant that I can fill the need that this trip will demand.
Thank you all very much for coming this evening.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
We've come a long way since 1963. A senseless tragedy promoted action and the beginning of the life-saving and life-changing VFW ambulance service. We'd like to thank all the men and women who continue to make this a safer community. And we thank you for joining us on Senior Perspective. I'm Erma Grego. Thank you for watching.